We learn from elders. We learn from survival. We learned from each other. For trans guys. Wisdom you can feel. Real talk. Collective care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of For Trans Guys. It's me, Megan Rohrer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zander Keig.
And I'm JJ.
And this is our inaugural podcast launch. And so we thought we should let you know a little bit about us. Some of the bubbled up adjectives that I might use about myself is a parent, a faith leader, someone on social media that's going to say kind and fun things to you. I do a lot of trans history work. And I have been trans a very long time, more than a decade. That's what I'll say. And I'm currently located in San Francisco, California. What about you, JJ?
I live in San Francisco as well. So happy to be back home. This is originally where I'm from. And some things that describe me: I'm a peer supporter at heart, been a chaplain for several years. I used to work in banking and have an MBA, and more recently trans than all of you, I think, probably about the last 5 years, more publicly trans. How about you, Zander?
Yes. Hello, everybody again. Well, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a husband. I'm a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. I am an author and an editor of some books that you might be familiar with if you've checked out Megan's page. We actually met, Megan and I met in seminary back in 2002. So we've known each other for quite a while. It was actually Megan who told me that I should ask my now wife out on a date. So I'm always grateful for that. And I live in Hillsboro, Oregon, which is just outside of Portland, Oregon. We're 15 miles west approximately. What I do for my job is I'm a well-being workshop facilitator in the corporate world.
And you might notice that there's only 3 of us, and it's called For Trans Guys. That's in part because it's for trans guys. Obviously, if you're not trans and you're not a guy and you want to listen, you are welcome to also listen along. But the reason that there are only 3 of us here right now is because our goal, and what you will see as our next episodes come out, is that we'll be inviting in an additional voice from time to time. And that 4th voice will be something unique and interesting and diverse, and maybe provide a new level of perspective on what trans possibilities are, especially in a world where sometimes, not where you live, but every once in a while where I live, there is some trans infighting, would be the way that I would put it. People think everyone needs to kind of all be the same. And even externally, outside the trans community, a lot of pressure to try to all be the same. And to kind of counteract that, we just want to celebrate and lift up as many people as possible. And in the link below, or if you go to transwisdom.net, you'll be able to find a form. And if you think you are that 4th trans guy and you want to be on our podcast, you can come on. Don't worry, we've got a whole bunch of amazing folk lined up. Zander and myself and JJ do a lot of mentoring with other people and a lot of being mentored by other people. And so we want to share with you some of the people who have really shaped our lives, because we think they might help shape your life. Zander and I worked together and edited a book called Letters for My Brothers: Transitional Wisdom in Retrospect. And this book is a series of letters that different trans men wrote. And the goal was for those who had transitioned for like 7 years plus, for them to write a letter to their former selves about what they wish they knew before they transitioned, and with kind of that goal of how to share what we think of as transitional wisdom, which is the things you learn along the way, or the things you learn in your becoming, or if you're someone who uses medicine or surgeries to transform your body, like how does that reshape what you know or who you think you are in your body. And fortunately, it was something that was kind of honored in the Lambda Literary Award as a finalist. It also sort of made the rounds and is still being used as a textbook in some gender studies class, if there are any of those left these days. But if you haven't read it, I invite you to check it out. It still is very helpful today. Very recently just got translated into Japanese so that it can be in other parts of the globe. But this idea of pondering what we wish we knew earlier, I think is still something that's super important to be sharing with each other. And I thought for our very first episode, we should go back to that question that 12 years ago we posed to a whole bunch of trans guys and answer it for ourselves. So what do we wish we knew earlier, Zander?
Yeah, funny story, when I was reaching out to people to ask them if they would write for that book, the responses were so very interesting, if you remember, right? Because the way that we formulate in our own minds and in our own lives how it is that we came to be trans or developed, as a trans person, or I think we used a word in our call for papers or stories. It was something like, when did you choose to transition or something? And there were a couple of people who pushed back on that really strongly because it didn't feel like a choice at all. It was as if it was something more organic, right? Which was not my experience. So it was an interesting thing to think about at the time. And that person, of course, and the one I'm thinking of, just didn't submit. They didn't like it. But so many people have read this book. I hear from people all the time still who have told me, thank goodness for this book. And, we got to take people back a little bit first to say, when we published the book, Letters from My Brother's Transitional Wisdom in Retrospect, this is before YouTube blew up. This is before all the social media platforms that exist now. How we found each other was through attending an event. If we even found out about the event, it was through organizations like FTM International, Female to Male International, which was, one of the only organizations that existed at the time that was specifically for what I would say, trans guys or trans men. There was also American Boys or Amboys, and that spawned a whole bunch of Yahoo groups that were with BOYZ at the end. So there's Desert Boys and Beach Boys and Bay Boys and Indie Boys, right? Knoxville Boys, right? So they're still going, just not in Yahoo because they got rid of those groups. But so the reason that we thought about doing this book was a way to share stories so that people could see that there wasn't just one way to transition. There wasn't just one way to identify. There wasn't just one way to be FTM or a trans man, or, we weren't using as expansive of language as we do now. And I don't remember exactly what I wrote about because it's been so long now. I think the book was published in 2010, wasn't it? I thought it was earlier than 2014. But when I think about it now, like what I wish I knew, it has a lot to do with realizing, because it took me a little while to realize this, and I wish I would have realized it earlier, is that I get to be me, right? I get to be the Zander that I want to be. I get to be the trans guy that I want to be. I figured it out within about 3 to 4 years, but I spent the first 3 or 4 years, I don't know, looking around and seeing how everybody else was doing it and not being really certain, like, how do I, because I started my transition when I was 39. I'm about to turn 60. So it's been 21 years. Things have changed a lot over these years. And what really made the difference for me was I was facilitating an FTM International discussion group in San Francisco back in the day. And somebody was talking about they didn't know how to do something now that they're this guy in society. They didn't know. It was something like getting on the bus in San Francisco and like how to be a passenger as a man. And this one guy was sitting there. He was visiting from somewhere else, and he had been transitioned. It was like 25 years at that point, right? So one of the earlier, one of the pioneers in our community. And he said, just get on the damn bus. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, we're probably in our head too much. And so I just said, that's it. I'm done. I'm just going to be me. That's the only person I know how to be. And we'll see how it goes. And I think it's been going great. So that's what I really wish I had known earlier on, is that I get to be me. I don't have to be anybody else's interpretation of masculinity or version of how to be a man. It's just me. How about you, JJ?
No, you make some incredible points, Zander, and I so appreciate it. I think for me, two things came out when this topic kind of came up as an idea. One, something you mentioned, Zander, I think growing up, I was so socialized, both as an actor, as a child actor, and then later as, pretending to be a woman. I was so socialized to play a role, right? And so I often addressed my masculinity as like playing a role in those 3 years that you described, where you were trying to figure out what it was, and then you finally decided you are you. I think I can resonate with that quite a bit, of trying to figure out how I project myself and how people perceive me, right? Like I do a lot of like analytical thinking as I'm trying to get on the bus, right? And pretty soon I just have to get on the damn bus. So one of the things I think that came up for me very early on, as I was around 20, 21, I was just having terrible female trouble. And as part of that, I kept going to the doctor, and they described it as polycystic ovarian syndrome, which has ironically now been renamed as a metabolic disorder of polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome just recently. And I keep my eye out on this particular one because it was such a stigma for me back then of not being woman enough to be who I'm supposed to be in society, whatever that meant. And so much of my wrestling was this idea that I had a testosterone level, even at 20, they described as similar to a young man. And I wish back then that medical establishment would have allowed me the opportunity to either use peer support or work with counselors or someone to talk about this idea that potentially I could be trans. My body could be telling me something that no one else is listening to. And as a massage therapist and really kind of working through my own psychology through kind of an embodied lens, that really spawned an entire journey for me of trying to figure out, like, what does it mean to have this really high testosterone level? And why am I constantly fighting myself with medication and trying to like make my body do these things that it just doesn't, number one, want to do, but it wasn't right to do. Simple things like I had always upper body strength that other people just didn't have, right? Like I would carry things. There was all this masculinity that people would portray, like, you're such a guy, you like do all these guy-like things. I'm like, no, I'm a woman. I have to be this woman because that's what the society is telling me to do. I have to play this role. So I think now I feel like a kind of settling, right? I'm almost 50 and I'm trying to like settle into this body and embody it fully as it is, all the quirks and bells and whistles that are coming with it, and allow it to be. And in some ways allow my body to teach my spirit, to teach my, mind. How do I want to live on this earth in this body? What does that feel most comfortable like? And what spaces celebrate this body in that way, and recognize it and hold it, whether it be sacred or just appreciate it for what it is, right? And I think that's where I love being around the three of you, is like, these are spaces where we get to celebrate the fact of who we are, maybe normalize it or appreciate it for where we are. This is reality of what we're living through, and not have to overanalyze it or put on any particular facade for it. So I'm just so grateful for the work that both of you did with the Letters for My Brothers, because you really set the tone for what is possible, and anything is possible. And I think that broke open opportunity and possibility that I didn't realize that I had, and no one else was telling me that I could have. Yeah, thank you guys. So how about you, Megan?
Yeah, I always like to think back to a story. Jameson Green, one of the kind of pioneer trans men in my life's journey, he was talking at the chaplaincy program that I was doing at San Francisco General Hospital, and he was kind of the guest speaker to be like Diversity 101. But I remember like he was kind of the only speaker I was interested in listening to, and he was talking about his own personal journey, that he had like done all of this like advanced degrees studying trans people but didn't identify as trans at the time, and someone said to him, you don't study this long and then not do it. Like, what are you waiting for? And I like remembered that sentence for a lot of years, because as Zander said, like the world was different. If you tried to go on the very young internet and type in the word trans or genderqueer or any of the words at the time and learn about it, you would only find pornography. You wouldn't, or like really graphic, just out of surgery photos. Like you would not see healed people in any sort of way, unless you went to a conference on one of the progressive cities, and then people would show you their surgery scars, and they would tell you which surgeon did the surgery, so that you could know kind of like what your body might look like if you entered any of these journeys. And so much of the trans world was kind of underground and word of mouth, and you had to like have friendships with really diverse people and listen to their stories, and you didn't always put it together. Like I told Jameson more than a decade after he told that story that like that sentence always stuck with me. And then when I like progressed more medically or more publicly or more in all of the varying ways that like being a trans man shifted each decade, like I really did discover this. Like you don't study something this long and then not doing it. Like you're learning about yourself. Stop pretending that you're like learning about something that's outside of yourself. And so like what I would really take from that is not even just that sentence, but keep with you all of the trans men and mentors and friends that you can, because especially the ones that you don't agree with politically, because they might understand something inside your body that people who agree with you politically will never understand or care to understand. And so as someone who grew up in South Dakota, where you have to be nice even to the worst person because they're the 100% going to be the one person driving by when the snowdrift is like encapsulating your car. I just am someone who is built to forge relationships and conversations and allyships across some of the boundaries that some people think are like no trespass zones when it comes to politics or ideas or work or other things like that. And for me, that's a survival tactic as a trans man. There are times when I've listened to someone's story and thought, I never am going to feel that way. And then fast forward 15 years in your life and you're like, that's 100% how I feel. And now I don't feel like I'm ridiculous or a broken person, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I had heard a story of someone who felt that way once too. And my hope is that as we continue to have more conversations, that those who are journeying with us, both listening here, will also chip in and share their stories. So I want to encourage anyone who feels comfortable, if you are on a place where comments can be left, it's now your turn to answer the question. What do you wish you knew earlier? We want to hear your stories and we'll respond to them. But also, JJ is really interested in having this not just be a podcast community, but to be a space where people can come together in person and maybe share the question of the week with each other. And so if you're someone who's interested in building and helping that community come alive, then particularly reach out to JJ. And JJ, what's your kind of envisioning about how this community unfolds?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that on our website, and if you can post that at some point, that'd be great. That on our website that we'd be able to have people drop in on a weekly basis and have conversation and community. So we're just developing that and starting it. So yeah, there it is, transitionalwisdom.net. And from there, we can, start to build more peer support conversations based on what people are looking for. It's a place, a container, a space for us to simply exist and feel safe and communicate all of our wisdom with each other.
Well, until then, we hope that you embrace and love yourself as the work in progress that you are. And if you are someone who does those things like subscribe, tell your friend that there's this podcast, send them an old-fashioned letter, or add it to that old Yahoo group if you're still in that. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.